One.
Hi, I'm Cherise, the nutritionist for Green Prescription,
Hi, and I'm Rebecca.
and we're going to talk about processed food today because there can be a lot of confusion about what does processed mean, how do we know if it's good for us or not, and so we're going to chat through a few things around that.
So, the term processed can be used for all foods that have been changed in some way. But we need to wrap our heads around that even fruit and veggies can be processed. But this doesn't necessarily mean that they're unhealthy.
Yeah.
So, for example, the apple that has been picked, washed and packaged at the supermarket is still a healthy whole food. It is still in its natural state of origin, and how it's found,
Yep.
essentially.
And same goes for things like packaged veggies and fruit, that they may have just been picked and washed and then put in a packet, and that's all the processing that has happened, but it is still processing. And then further along in our continuum of processing, we've got things like frozen veggies and fruit that again they've been picked, washed, and then they've been snap frozen, so they actually still retain a lot of goodness, and in some cases the frozen version actually has more nutrients than the fresh version because it's snap frozen really quickly and keeps all of that, all of those nutrients and goodness that can degrade over time with light and air exposure. What else?
The same with our tinned fruit and veggies, although we need to be sure to check that they don't have too much added sugar or salt, because that is what preserves them. So it still is a natural form, but there may be a lot of additives to them, so ensuring that you're checking for low sodium and low sugar.
Yeah. And then we've got next, so this is just an array of examples, so there's lots of other things that you could put in here, but other things going further down the processing track are things like our grains. So whole grains that you use for porridge, that's often had the bran taken off it through the machines of flattening the grain, but then you get further down of those grains are ground up into flour, so that's another form of being more processed. And then after that, those grain flours might be turned into other products, baked goods, bread, biscuits, all that sort of stuff, muesli bars, that sort of thing. And yeah, as Bex will talk about, we need to understand that the more processing that happens and the more additives that are put in it, the less that it resembles food. And that's what we're talking about when we say try and avoid processed food. We're talking about things that are way down this end of the track where it doesn't really even resemble food anymore because it's had so many things done to it. So this is a little snack really popular with kids. So you've got processed crackers that it's grains turned into flour and then baked into a biscuit or a cracker.
Yeah.
You've got a cheese spread, which it will still have some of the components of cheese, but because it's been made shelf stable, so it doesn't need to go in the fridge, it's got a whole lot of other things in it to preserve it, and that can be less healthy for our bodies.
And essentially they don't go off.
No.
So that's when you know there's a lot of preservatives in it.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good tip, isn't it, Bex? That
Yeah.
if there's something in the supermarket that you think that should probably be in the fridge and it's not,
Yeah.
that probably indicates that it's got some things in it that are there to preserve it,
Yeah.
And to be aware of that.
Yes. Also, we need to understand that some foods are processed because it's actually safer for us.
Yeah.
So, say like milk and yogurt, there is harmful bacteria taken out of that. So that is a process which is essentially making it healthier and safer for us to eat, because those harmful bacteria are not good for our body.
Yeah. And some of the processing, like cooking is another process that we don't think of as processing, but cooking is a process, and for some of our foods that's actually how we get the nutrients. When our bodies are not able to digest them properly if they're in their uncooked state. So some of the things like dried legumes, they have to be cooked because our bodies can't digest them, or in some cases they can be a little bit toxic as well if they're not cooked and prepared properly. So yeah, cooking is another process to be thinking about.
Yeah. So it's kind of important to understand this processing report card. So it goes from A to E, and it kind of factors in all the foods that we're eating, and from least processed to ultra processed. So On our A, we've got our whole foods. So we've got our fruits, veggies, nuts and seeds that are in their natural form and haven't been touched or anything added to them. Our B is our closest to natural state. So this is anything from our oats, nut butters, our olive oils, legumes, milk and yogurts. And do you want me to keep? Yep. C is our semi-processed. So we've got our flours, our white pastas, our cereals, our canned tuna, our cheese, and like white breads and breads.
Baked goods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then D, we've got our ultra processed, so our chocolates, chips.
Even these muesli bars, even though they do have whole grains, they've got a lot of stuff put
like
into
this.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chocolate chips, biscuits, all that stuff that is just complete additives, essentially. And then our E is our ultra processed food with the lengthy labels at the back and the additives that we don't even understand what they mean. So our soft drinks, confectionery, even our some of the meat we're eating, such as bacon and mince pies.
Yeah.
A lot of additives added to that, which preserve it essentially.
Yes. And some of the preservatives that they use are meant to be deemed safe, but for some people they can be really sensitive to what some of those additives are, and then also over time it can have effects on our body in terms of our long-term health and conditions. So we're just going to finish off with one real quick little tip. So this is actually a snack that I was fooled by, because on the front it looks like peas in a pod, and yes, it actually has less sodium, less fat, and it's baked, and it actually has more fibre than potato chips. So essentially it is healthier than potato chips or crisps. But when I opened it up, I realised that actually this has been very processed, because it's using pea flour, it's green peas, but it's not just a pea that they've baked. It's a pea that's been baked, ground into flour, and then reprocessed back into pea shapes to make it look like it's really healthy. So that's just a little quick trick just to watch out for. That we're not saying that all processed food is not good for you, because most foods have some processing in some form, whether that's right down here of being picked and washed, or if it's way up here of really ultra processed, it doesn't really resemble the food that it once was. That's what to be thinking about. And when we talk about minimizing processed refined food, this is the end of the continuum or spectrum that we're talking about. Things that have had lots of changes and modifications made to it, and it doesn't really resemble the food anymore. So thanks for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another video. Thanks.
Well, thank you.
Bye.